Hello, everyone. This is Randy Burton here. Welcome to Real Talk with Randy, episode 8. And today I am featuring a special guest, Adam Blosfield. He works with me here at Averro. Adam, say hello and kind of give us a little snapshot of what you do for us.
Hello, Real Talk with Randy audience. As Randy said, my name is Adam Blosfield. I am a director of sales, formerly the director of the Northern California and Nevada business units. I've been with Averro coming up on 6 years now, and very much enjoy working with Randy and everybody else over here. Looking forward to getting into the topic of today.
Yeah, and it's a good one, right? I mean, especially in these economic times that we're in these days. I mean, what we need one more quarter of losses to be officially in a recession, and gosh, I mean, announcements of layoffs and hiring freezes and offers being rescinded left and right. I mean, gosh, even this week alone, it's just been off the hook. So, hot topic. Kind of the advantages, disadvantages, pros, cons, whatever you want to call it, between hiring contractors and hiring full time. So, like I had mentioned, we're kind of on the edge or the cusp of going into an economic recession. And so we want to discuss these points today just to help educate, business leaders out there who are trying to plan their headcount, forecast for budget, all of those fun strategic things that leaders get to do these days. So hiring in the midst of a recession is a tricky ordeal, right? Headcount forecasting is a mess, budgets are shifting, and there's more reservations around spending, and it's on the horizon. But hiring will still need to happen, right? So in order to keep the business growing, you just have to be more deliberate in times like these in the approach and the model of how you hire, right? So let's get right into it. So you might think that if you hire a contract employee, that they won't integrate into your culture, but that's far from the truth. We do this every day as Averro, right? And if you partner with the right agency that truly understands your business, it's critical, to spinning up a successful contract hiring a contract employee, right? So let's drop some facts here, some reasons that it might make sense to hire a contractor employee instead of a direct FTE.
Cool. Yeah. First and foremost, hiring contractors is cheaper in the long run, as you're not on the hook for paying Social Security, Medicare, workers' comp, and the rest of the benefits. Although the hourly bill rates are going to make it seem like it's the opposite, in the end, it's just not the case. In fact, hiring an employee as a direct FTE on average costs twice the salary. Not to mention that FTEs typically take about 30 days longer to be fully ramped up due to deeper integration into your company. So there really are a lot of hidden costs that go into the full-time employees. And a thing that we talk about often is the cost of a bad hire, and this really is associated specifically and exclusively with FTEs, far more so than the contractors. So that's one of the benefits in and of itself for hiring contractors in comparison to that of a full-time employee.
Yeah, that's certainly a great point, Adam. Another one. I mean, if you're hiring contractors, you can really get super specific and specialized with who you target to hire for that particular initiative, right? So you can hire a specialized resource to push a project through the finish line. And you might have a different strategy if you were to look at that hire as a direct full-time, considering, growth potential and growth track and all of that kind of stuff. Think of your contractors as true specialists that are hired for a specific skill set to complete a specific task or project.
Yeah, and then kind of coupling off of that, when there's the option of having a contractor, many times for a number of years we saw the popularity of contract to hire, where one is initially brought in as a contractor, so it speeds up the hiring process, gets them on board, but it really does become almost like a working interview. Try before you buy is often a phrase that we heard associated with this for a number of years. So many times there's a sliding scale. A lot of different companies have different parameters relative to what that would look like, whether it's a conversion after a certain period of time or an immediate buyout. But hiring as a contract employee initially gives you that real advantage to ensure that it's a fit on both sides, both from the client evaluating the contractor and potential to be an FTE. And then on the flip side, many times, contractors are concerned about going into an environment that doesn't align with what they are seeking. And this really gives them the working opportunity, the nuts and the bolts of the day-to-day functions, the team, the culture, the tech stack, et cetera, as to whether it's a benefit. What I find really fascinating is that just a number of years ago, the preferred method of, contract to hire became really, really popular, and it's starting to kind of fall out of favor. And in sitting down with a chief human resources officer just a few months back, I tried to get a better understanding as to why that might be the case. And it does seem to be fairly widespread. And this is a buyer previously of contract to hire services that indicated that he had great trepidation and fear that they would likely lose the resource during the contract portion, even though there was an intent to convert, if and when another competing company came along with an offer that was full-time from day one. So it's been really interesting and fascinating to see the evolution and popularity of contract to hire, and now it's kind of on its way out of favor. So definitely curious to see how that changes, or if it continues the same trend that it's on right now as things shift in the economy.
For sure. Yeah, something we'll definitely be keeping our eyes closely on. Another key point, any reputable agency which employs the contractor will be able to help you manage through any performance issues. I mean, we all know that sometimes onboarding can be a little rocky and shaky, but if you were to hire a contractor and you're working with a good agency like Averro, shameless plug, you're not on your own, when it comes to managing through, challenges or, even performance issues, right? In order to avoid co-employment, it's our job as the agency to technically manage that employee, and you as the manager or customer, are responsible for providing them, day-to-day, work, like priorities and what they should be working on. So, you're not on your own when it comes to managing the contract employees, which removes most of the management burden off your plate. And, in my mind and the leaders that I talk to, I mean, that's a big deal, right? They spend a lot of time with their employees, putting out fires or, addressing issues, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, and in the scenario that unfortunately the work doesn't turn around, it's just plain harder to lay off a full-time employee. There's a lot more employment law associated with that from a client perspective. So again, with the uncertain economic state, this very well could prove to be a valuable component of this preferred model of hiring and sadly terminating.
Right. I mean, nobody ever wants to talk about, terminations or layoffs and that kind of stuff. But, especially as we're approaching these uncertain economic times, I mean, if you can't plan, beyond a quarter of work, then you probably should seriously consider hiring contract employees rather than direct full-time. And then, last but not least, and I think this is one of the best points out there, right? Like, interview processes can be more streamlined when you're hiring contract employees. You can assume a little bit more risk when making hiring decisions and just generally like get people on the ground producing faster, right? I mean, for us, if we've got an engaged client, usually we can get somebody on the ground within a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, and 2-3 weeks beyond that, once they're integrated, they're delivering. Like, who wouldn't want that, right? So at the end of the day, those are the things that, Adam and I could think about that were just really good points and arguments around why you should, consider hiring contract employees, contract to hire model, whatever might work for you. So, let's talk about hiring direct full-time employees and when that might be the best, right? Adam, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that immediately comes to mind, especially working with so many developers throughout the course of the year, in something that clients have cited often, is the loss of tribal knowledge. Contractors come in and do something very specific, oftentimes with a very specific set of skills. And then once they're done, I think far more often than anybody would want to acknowledge and agree, they're out and that's what they were used for. But if you don't have a proper way to document that, the contractor ends their assignment and then all that tribal knowledge goes with them. And any developer will tell you from a documentation standpoint, we all know it's key, but sometimes it's not the most important thing because there's other competing priorities. So losing that tribal knowledge can be absolutely devastating. So there's a critical component that has to be taken into account to ensure that you're capturing that prior to, the consultant leaving.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, intellectual property, all that kind of stuff. I mean, you want to ensure that stuff stays in house, especially if, as people kind of end projects and move on to their next assignments and eventually leave your organization, right? So that's key. Another point, like, and I think this one's kind of assumed, right? But, if you're like really in a position that you are truly looking to hire somebody for the long run, right? But with that comes the perspective of like, you have to be ready to be responsible for their professional development. I think especially, post-pandemic and all that kind of stuff, everybody is really super hypersensitive about growth opportunity, continual learning, healthy cultural environment, all of those things, right? So, if you don't have the time as a leader or the desire to take people under your wing and grow them through your organizations, then like maybe you're not ready to hire a full-time employee, because that's what they're going to expect coming in the door.
Yeah, I totally agree. Another thing that comes to mind for me is you see a lot of the readings and studies that reference that full-time employees are either more loyal or engaged, bought into the mission of the company, and help develop the critical internal relationships, and are more assimilated into the culture. I just don't buy it. And I think that any of us that have been in the recruiting game for a number of years would tend to agree with that. In fact, I mean, just take into consideration how many times you see somebody staying at the same company for 30 years anymore. There are a number of reasons why that would be viewed as a concern or a red flag, where I know, decade, 2 decades ago, it was the inverse, but cultural components are going to be something that the contractors want to be a part of as well. So it's how do we integrate them in effectively? And again, it comes back to, us as the firm understanding the client's culture and being able to share that accurately and portray it to the prospective candidates, and then continuing that once they get into the organization.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. No doubt. And then, yeah, last but not least, I mean, I think this is always kind of a common theme and concern when considering, hiring full-time versus contract, that kind of thing, is concern about co-employment, right? But, to me, I mean, we haven't dealt with any co-employment issues throughout the course of my almost 7 years with the organization, 20 plus years, in staffing and that kind of stuff. I think the key is, if you're working with a true agency partner, co-employment should not be a concern at all, right? I'm sure there's 1,000 other reasons why, people might have around like, hiring full-time over contractors, but these are just kind of some of the key points that we brainstormed about in preparation for this episode. So if you have other thoughts, feel free to comment or reach out to Adam or myself for deeper discussions. But there was one other thing that we wanted to cover during these topics today, which is, and this really kind of factors into the whole budgeting process, right? I mean, CapEx, OpEx, like, to me, it's a little bit more of a mystery. Adam's a lot more educated on this topic. So I wanted to have him kind of speak a little bit more about like the differences between the two, and how those budgets apply to hiring for contractors and full-time employees.
Yeah, definitely. One, CapEx is going to hit the full-time head count more often than not, and OpEx is going to be more from the contractor budget. So as being recognized as two entirely different buckets of funding, it's definitely important as one is going through and evaluating where the monies are going to come from. Simply put, in layman terms, CapEx, the assets are expected to provide value beyond a single year, and then long-term value to the company. And there's usually a large upfront cost involved. And yeah, a contrarian can say, well, what about if a contractor's out there for multiple years? Sure, they are going to provide value beyond that, single year, but that large upfront cost component is not involved, because it's going to be a monthly type of operational expenditure, which is a good segue into OpEx. Fully consumed is really the term within the tax year in which it's purchased. So, you could really kind of spread that cost out throughout the year, and you really can start talking about assets and depreciation, all that sort of stuff. But, by and large, from a CapEx perspective, full-time, OpEx, consultant, where is the money coming from and how is it going to be allocated is probably the easiest way to really break that down.
All right. All right. Well, people, those are our thoughts. Thank you very much, Adam, for joining me today on this episode. We hope that this information is valuable to you. And again, like I had mentioned, if you have any questions or would like to talk more deeply with Adam or myself about this topic, feel free to reach out. we're pretty easy to get a hold of. So that concludes episode 8 of Real Talk with Randy. Thanks everyone for watching. Thanks again, Adam. Have a great day.